Dear friends, may you all be in the best of health and spirits. I wanted to give a short talk about something that's very important in the Quran. The Quran is something of an ocean. It is full of so many different stories and the prophets and their teachings, God's seeking to bring his servants into the light, and his admonishment of those who fail to understand. So the Quran is therefore necessarily an uneven read. It is full of so many things. But one of the most beautiful passages in the Quran and in Rumi's teachings on this same matter has to do with the expansion of the breast. And so perhaps we could just remember that in the Quran we can, for example, see Moses turning to God, and he says, Rabbi ashrah li sadri. So he says, oh, my Lord, do expand my sadr, my breast, my chest. Because that, of course, is where the heart is, the spiritual heart. And more famously, we have the Surah An-Shirah, which is, for those of you who might want to see that, is in it's the 94th chapter of the Quran, and there the famous opening verse is God says to the Prophet, peace be upon him, he says, Alam nashrah laka sadrak. He says, have we not opened or dilated or expanded your breast? Alam nashrah laka sadraka. And so Rumi decides to give a commentary of sorts under the title of Wa huwa ma'akum aynama kuntum. And this itself is a verse in the Quran, but Rumi decides to give this as a title to this short talk. So, Wa huwa ma'akum aynama kuntum. He is with you wherever you are. So in any state or stage. So if he's with us, he is present within us. And it's very possible that we don't feel that presence. And it's also possible to learn to feel that presence and the secrets of wisdom and salvation that we could find therein. So he says, Rumi says in Persian, Dar dil salek agar hast on rumuz, ramzadani nist salek ra hanuz. Ta dilesh ra sharh on sazad ziya, bas alam nashrah befarmayad khuda. So in these first two lines, he says, though the spiritual secrets are held in the seeker's heart, they exist in the seeker's heart, there is not yet the knowing of those secrets until the expanding brings the heart radiance. And we could also say, for that particular line, until the irradiation, meaning this idea of sharha, it has the sense of expansion, irradiation, and penetration. So until the expanding brings the heart radiance, and God recites, have we not expanded? So the next two lines, he says, Dar darune sina sharhat dadaim, sharh andar sinaat benehodaim. So in this line, Rumi again is quoting God, or quoting the intentions of God in the earlier passages from the Quran. He says, and God recites, have we not expanded? Within the breast we have given your opening, your expansion. We have placed the expansion in your breast. After that, he says, but you still seek it outside of yourself. And that's, of course, where the famous line, he is with you wherever you are, is people are looking here and there, but in the great ocean of the Quran, there's coral, there's fishes, sharks, all kinds of things. But perhaps the most precious pearl lies in this statement that Rumi is trying to make. And the Sufis know that one can indeed regain a consciousness of that state of knowing God and knowing God's secrets within the Sadr. And that's why we will see it again and again repeated throughout the Quran. And essentially, it invites us to a transformation that isn't permanent. It's an access to a capacity that we have at a deep level, and it returns us to a state of directness, intimacy, and the feeling of God's presence within our own heart. And it therefore frees us from the tyranny and the prison and the suffering and the misery of the self, which is seeking to sustain its existence or to gain the upper hand or to be recognized or any of these things, not to mention the sadness of loss of various kinds. So it is essentially a refuge, a lovely, lovely refuge in the heart. And so this is, of course, the purpose of Sufism. And I want to keep this talk very short so that we don't move away from the point that I'm trying to make. The prophets, many of them, they turn to God asking this question: O Lord, please expand my breast, my chest, my solar plexus. Please expand my heart. And in that expansion, they not only find a great intimacy with God, but they are given secrets. Secrets of what sort? Well, the particular kinds of illumination that will correspond to the needs of that person. So if it's a prophet, it will be limited to the message that the prophet brings, as well as the prophet's own predisposition. Rumi does a very nice thing here because he decides to include, justifiably, he decides to include the possibility that the expansion mentioned in those Quranic verses can apply to anyone, because God says he is with you wherever you are. And he makes no exclusion in that statement. And I should say that I think Rumi is deliberately wanting any skeptic to think about he is with you wherever you are before they make the judgment that you might be able to have your solar plexus open and expanded and dilated by God's presence. So, again, this could be one of the most important statements in the Quran. It certainly would be the greatest gift, the greatest familiarity with God, the greatest intimacy, and therefore wouldn't it be better than paradise in some couches, eating fruit? Wouldn't it be better than being the emperor of the world? Wouldn't it be better than living forever in this bodily form? Because in fact, it does allow us to taste the hereafter, or a better way to put it, it allows us to taste our original nature, which is unborn. So, my friends, that's all that I have to say to you. As I said, I wanted to keep this brief, but I ask you to consider how wonderful the Bushra, the great good news, how wonderful that is in the Quran and in the teachings of the Sufis. So may God bless you all.